All right, Grizz Nation, we are here with another episode of Fight on Montana. We have the special guest here with us today, Colter Nuanez with Skyline Sports, ESPN Montana Radio. Colter, can't thank you enough for coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to talk with you and meet your audience. Thanks for having me.
Exactly. Well, guys, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as you always do, but find us there. What we're going to do is just kind of do a recap of the year so far and then get into the Northern Colorado matchup. So, Colter, one thing I wanted to kind of talk to you about is, going into the beginning of this year, what were your expectations knowing what the Grizz had coming back? What were you thinking this year was going to be?
Such an interesting question because I thought last year, for as talented as the Grizz were, the lofty expectations and sort of the way that they had this whole plan. Their whole plan was they're going to go 6-0 before the Sac State game, and then we're going to go down to Sacramento State. We're going to get revenge, and then we're going to be rolling. And that all got derailed basically with one onside kick to start the second half against Idaho, and then all of a sudden they lose that game, and whoa, everything didn't go according to plan. And then Lucas Johnson gets knocked out, and then it spirals, and all of a sudden the weight of these crazy expectations is just bearing down on them. And I thought that was one of the main reasons why you saw Montana sort of unravel. And they did get it together a little bit. They won 2 games in November, and then, of course, won a playoff game. But, I mean, it didn't go even close to according to plan. I mean, last year was supposed to be Montana's year. The RTD, the return to dominance, was supposed to come to fruition. It's Coach Hauk sending his son out with a national championship and all these huge, lofty expectations with all these All-Americans all over the roster. So I thought, though, the removal, I mean, Montana's always going to have high expectations. Yeah. That's just how it is. They're always going to have, that's like my brother and I always say on our Big Sky Breakdown podcast. The whole lens through which we analyze all of this is that it's national championship or bust. It's true playoff runs, Final Fours, and national championship or bust if you're Montana, period. But I did think, coming into the year, not being picked to win the league, not having all these All-Americans all over the place, I thought maybe that actually might cater to the Grizz because, I mean, Luke knows this as somebody that played at Montana. Like, sometimes your most fearsome opponent is yourself and the weight of expectations, the standard. Because, I mean, you got to live in Missoula. When the Grizz lost to NAU, it's like the world is ending. You have tens of thousands of people that are freaking out. But that's what makes it great, right? Because then, when you win and you have a 3-game winning streak, then everybody's loving it. All of a sudden, the Grizz are back to being conference contenders and all this sort of stuff. So I thought that coming into this year, they had a chance to actually be a little bit better just because I thought they were going to be more even defensively. I knew they were going to adjust a lot of stuff on their back end. Because let's be honest, I mean, you can say whatever you want about Robbie Hauk. He's a great player. Oh, yeah. He's an incredibly productive player, but he runs the alley as well as anybody. He was their third linebacker in that scheme for a really long time. Yeah. I thought, okay, remove him. Now the safeties can play a little bit more traditional roles. You don't have Justin Ford. Okay, now you can run some combo coverages, some actual zone on the back end. And, oh, by the way, you expect to have multiple senior starters on your offensive line. So I thought coming into the year, I actually thought Montana had a chance to be better than they were a year ago. Then out the gates, it was like, oh, wow, maybe not. Maybe they just don't have the horses. But that's completely changed, and that's why just the mania of the Grizz roller coaster is so fun to be a part of because it's definitely been a lot of different opinions about this team are only 6 or 7 games in.
Yeah. Roller coaster is a good description of the team because and not to mention the fans' emotions, like you were saying. I mean, after that NAU game, it was like, I mean, there's people I was talking to who thought the season was over. They're like, we'll be lucky to get another damn game. And yeah, it's amazing the flip that we've had, especially on that offensive line, because that was their worst game. And I think this Idaho game may have been their best game. They were out there just dominating. And like we talked last pod, whoever motivated old Hunter McGinnis this last game, I mean, when he's driving people out of bounds and they're ripping his helmet off, it's like it's very refreshing.
Totally. And I mean, what we saw at Northern Arizona, I think was startling to so many people that follow Grizz football. Because, I mean, you go lay an egg on the road. Okay, that happens in college football every single week. Even the best of the best, with the exception of Georgia, because they're a pro team. They're never going to lose again, I don't think. But besides that, I mean, I mean, look at Washington. Washington has this great win over Oregon, and then they come all the way down the wire and they barely win this last week. You just never know when you're going to fall flat. It's not that uncommon to have a poor performance on the road. I think that it was so startling, that Northern Arizona game, because not only did the Grizz get completely outplayed and have so many different miscues and turnovers, they also played terrible on special teams. That's like a once in an entire career occurrence for a Bobby Hauck team to get completely wiped in the kick game. And not only did they have they were lacking continuity on the offensive line, but they were also lacking effort on defense. Nobody was in the right spot. I mean, the Grizz have lost games before under Coach Hauck. They've never been that disorganized and that lacking of passion. So I think Grizz fans were like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Did these guys, did Coach Hauck lose the team? Did these guys just not have the horses? Is this like doomsday scenario? And then they completely flipped it. And I think there's three factors that go into it. One, and I know the coaching staff's been getting a bunch of credit, and we'll get to them in just a minute, but I think truly being around these guys, the senior group on this team, Levi Janicaro and Alex Gubner and AJ Forbes and Tyler Flink and Braxton Hill and Trajan Cotton, you can go on and on and on, Garrett Graves, Nash Fouch. These guys were like, we're not going out like that. That's not how it's going to work. We're not going out like that. That was our worst performance of our careers. We're not doing that again. So kudos to those guys for staying in it. Then the coaching staff, though, too. They finally decided to pick a quarterback who can actually be a leader, and they decided to actually adjust their offense. I mean, that's the thing that's been so maddening is last year they had all these offensive problems, and they wouldn't adjust offensively at all. Yeah. Well, they completely ran a new offense for the last two games. So kudos to them for doing that and doing it to get their playmakers the stuff in space. And I think that third, though, I think that they've come together, and I think that they've done the correct adjustments up front. They got some guys back on the defensive line, which helps so much.
Yeah.
But also, they've been running these wide splits on the offensive line. And I think that they realized, hey, we're not like a pass pro team. We're not going to be able to form a pocket and do all this stuff. But if we get our linemen in space and move them around a little bit, okay, we might be a little bit better like that. So I give them all the credit in the world for the adjustments they've made, especially on the offensive line, because I don't know why there's a disconnect there. I don't know why they can't just do traditional pass protection, but they can't. But they can totally get out in space and block in the screen game and all that stuff. So I think that the adjustments they've made, but more importantly, the heart of the seniors has been the thing that really has helped them turn the corner.
Well, and Colter, you've said on your podcast, Nuanez Now, great show, radio show. If you guys haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's amazing. But you've said on there that the tradition of the Montana football, that you've said that's kind of gotten in the way of it taking that next step. We've seen some great steps, but do you see that tradition still playing an effect in possibly long-term successful? Because right now, it's great and all, but we've still got to win. What, Luke? We've told 2 games at least.
Yeah,
2 games. We need 2 more games.
If you count Northern Colorado and Portland State as wins,
yeah,
we have to get those 2, and then it'd be nice if we could grab one of the other ones too. But
I think they got to win 3 out of 4, just because I think that the playoff committee is going to hold that D2 against them. So I think the way to truly do it is to win 3 out of 4.
I was seeing something that they were saying there's going to be a ton, like the most 7-win teams ever left out of the playoffs this year is what they're thinking. So I think you're right on, Colter. I think we need to win 3 more to guarantee a spot.
So that tradition is, and I don't think I think it goes whole athletic department, right? Sure. Women's basketball, men's basketball. The great athletic department right now, or great sport right now, is soccer, which has had that athletic ability and that tradition, but it got in their way for 1 year, and then look at this year. They've redone some things and they've created a great program again. Where do we get to the fact of where does that go? Like, how do we fix that? Is that a mindset? Does that come from the top? Does that come from the athletic director? Where do we go?
It's such an interesting point too. Because I mean, I've talked with Brian Holsinger about this a lot, the Lady Grizz head coach, because he says, how can you not honor Robin Selvig at every turn, right? I mean, I was at the Macklemore concert at the Adams Center the other week, and Macklemore's sitting there pointing about all the banners. He's like, "Man, you guys are pretty good at women's basketball." It's like, yeah, there's about 40 banners up there. They won quite a bit. So, I mean, how do you embrace that, but then not let it overshadow you and just sort of overwhelm the entire narrative of your athletic department?
Yeah,
Grizz soccer is a great example. I think that one thing that maybe some of the coaches that have such deep Montana ties, like Bobby Houck and Travis DeCure, I think one thing that they've had a hard time grappling with and grasping is that so much of playing for the Grizz used to be about like being overlooked and underrated and chip on your shoulder, and you're going to school in this tiny little mountain town that nobody's ever heard of except for because of the football team. I mean, Missoula and Bozeman are on the map now. I mean, people know that about these towns, and it isn't like, I used to always ask all the recruits, what'd you think of Montana before you came on a visit? You know, and they're like, oh, I thought I was going to a one-horse town. You know, everybody's going to be riding their horse to school and all that stuff. You know, that's not it anymore. Missoula and Bozeman are, I mean, they're urban areas now. I mean, I know that they're, you know, it's not some huge city, but they've been very urbanized. There's, you know, it's a cosmopolitan lifestyle in Missoula in a lot of ways. I mean, it's, you know, we see that in the cost of living and all the things there are to do. And I mean, you go downtown now, it used to be like in the summer, everywhere would be dead, right? Because all the students were gone. Now it's not dictated like that at all. You go downtown, everywhere's busy. You know, they're catering way more to people like me in their mid-30s than they are the college kids. So I think that's part of it. But that's where the soccer team has been so great is Chris Chidovitsky says, hey, we got this great tradition. We got these banners. We got this home field advantage. We got all this stuff. But also, why not just go recruit the best of the best? Why not just say, hey, we're going to go heads up with everybody because Missoula, Montana is freaking sweet. Let's get everybody to come here. I mean, they just landed a commitment from the number one prospect in the entire Northwestern United States. This girl's a top 25 recruit in the country. Wow. She's on the United States national team. Like, this girl is going to be the best. I mean, she's the biggest recruit the Big Sky Conference has ever seen. Yeah. And they just sold her on, hey, Missoula is a sweet place to live. Montana's a great place to go to school, and we're really good. So come, you know, be a part of something special. I was thinking about that when it comes to the football team because Bobby Houck's formula is – his schemes are way different than the first time around, but his formula is completely unchanged. Yeah. He wants it to be all about discipline, hard work, toughness. Those values are unbreakable. I mean, those values are why he's such a popular coach, even though he is he's bristly in the media and, you know, he doesn't give it up like a lot of coaches do. He's still so popular because he represents like the ethos of Montana, right? Like what his teams play so on brand for what you think Montana would be like. But you look at like the guys that he got out of the state of Montana the first time around with his exact same formula. I mean, the best players in the state of Montana now are 5'9" slot receivers from Billings, like Junior Bergen and Taco Dowler and Gabe Sulcer. Yeah. They're not future second round draft picks like Lex Hilliard and, you know, guys that are going to go start in the NFL on the defensive line like Troy Bierman. Yeah. So the formula is a little different. I also think that Coach Houck, he got so much credit for all the walk-ons he brought in the first time around, but he would manipulate those guys so much and say, hey, we're going to give you a third of the scholarship 3 different ways. Whoever becomes an all-conference player first, you're getting a scholarship. And then he would always bring in a transfer to battle those guys in their position groups. Well, first of all, the transfers used to have to sit out a year. Yeah. So they'd have to acclimate to the team for a full year before they got anything handed to them. And second, Montana kids, they used to live in this little bubble. There was no knowledge of what was going on anywhere else. Yeah. Now it's so much easier for kids to quit, to transfer, all that sort of stuff. So you just wonder how many guys just got left in the wash or, you know, whatever, and didn't get to develop into what they were going to become. I mean, people forget, like Chase Reynolds was toiling away as like a 9th string wide receiver until
he sure was.
Then one day, boom, 3 guys get hurt, and they're like, shoot, we need a running back. And they put this guy in, and it's like, oh, that guy's the best running back in Montana history besides probably Lex Hilliard. You know, so I don't know if Montana's producing the same type of guys. To answer the question, though, Adam, I mean, I think it just comes down to truly believing in what you know you got in Missoula and the university and all that sort of stuff, and the fans, the tradition. You can embrace it and still also do it from a new age model, right? Like if I'm Montana, I'm offering every single big time guy in the Northwestern United States. Yeah. You might only get 5 out of 100, 10 out of 100. You're still getting 10 out of 100. Right. Like, why not do that? That's what Jeff Choate did so well at Montana State, and it's still paying dividends now. That's why the Bobcats are so talented.
Well, when you look at like Mountain West teams, right? And you can't tell me that, you know, and I live in Wyoming, and Wyoming compared to Missoula is
Right.
I don't think it is even close.
Totally.
Air Force, it's around them in, you know, Denver and stuff, but like what Mountain West team is going to be better than Montana? Probably San Diego State because they're in California. Maybe Boise State because of the tradition that they have there. But all those other places, you can go and battle those teams for offensive linemen where we've been hurting.
Yeah.
And the thing that has been told to us is that offensive linemen don't grow on trees. Well, everybody else is able to get those guys, except for us. And so is it something like with recruiting? Are we not, and you said it, we're not probably going after the guys that we should because we're trying to get, transfers and stuff like that. But it just seems like we just need to renovate what we're doing a little bit to like the new age, where, going after those guys, like you said. So one question that I had, and Luke, you can kind of go into it, is like, how, if you were to give our offensive line a grade, what would you say? Because the last couple of games they've been better, right? Idaho has been amazing, but overall of a span of 7 games, what kind of a grade would you give them?
Man, I'm giving them like an 82. So
Okay.
that'd be like it's like a B or a B minus.
That's
right?
what I was thinking. B minus.
Yeah. And then like let's talk like NCAA or NCAA video game ratings, right? You go down the line. Like I'd say Chris Walker's like a 79. He's got crazy upside, but he's just not that polished at the position.
Right. Yep.
Both your guards are probably in the mid 70s, depending on who you're playing in there, whether it's Journey Groomsrud or Liam Brown or Cannon Panfiloff. McGinnis is like a 92 when he has his head on straight. And I thought he played like a 95 on Saturday.
Yeah, he did.
But then he also can play like a 65 when he's, not blocking him when, walking off the field. I do think, though, they did a good job of turning him around because I think that was that's something where you can lose a guy. And I mean, he's one of their 5 most talented players. So you need him to stay in it. They got him back in it. And then Brandon Casey's probably like an 80. So, that's the thing is they've gotten better on the offensive line. Mm-hmm. And they're pretty okay on the offensive line. But to get where you want to go, I mean, look at the best teams in the country. I mean, Montana State's got the best offensive line in the country. South Dakota State's got the second best offensive line in the country. Yeah. I mean, Idaho had a good offensive line, and they lost 2 guys, one before the Montana game, one in the Montana game. And look what happens. Their quarterback gets sacked 6 times. He's running for his life. So, it's such an important spot. And it's so interesting to me because you think, okay, you got multiple guys that had FBS offers or played at FBS schools, right? You got 2 Big Ten drop downs. You got a kid in Brandon Casey who they beat Oregon State straight up to get him.
Yeah.
And, and then you got these other guys. I mean, Liam Brown was a highly recruited guy. So then does it come down to development? Is it a scheme thing? Where are we at? And, I think part of it is that they know that they've gotten better. I don't know if they evaluate externally enough to understand where they sit. Like they have, I'd say they probably have one of the, 12 or 14 best offensive lines in the country, but you're in the Big Sky Conference.
Yeah.
You probably have the 5th best offensive line in the league, even though you still probably have a top 10 unit in the country.
Right.
It's a huge disconnect, right? Like Sac State's got all these senior guys on the offensive line. Weber does too. I know Weber's struggling this year, but I guess it's just perplexing to me because we've analyzed it so much. And you'd think that this was the year they were going to be truly dominant. And they've been good, but not great, not exceptional, and not dominant.
Yeah, not dominant. And that's what a lot of people thought at the beginning of the year. It was like, oh, that's a spot we don't have to worry about. I was saying the same thing. And then it was like, oh, wait, maybe we do have to worry about it. But I do feel in these last 2 weeks, they've put a fire under them and they're all playing better. But we noticed, too, when they were jumping back and forth between Clifton and Vidlac, like you were saying earlier, Colter, they were straight up pass block and they sucked. And that's basically what they were doing with Vidlac. And then all of a sudden you'd see them playing way better for Clifton because they're really run blocking and play action pass blocking and stuff. So having him
it bothers me because I could see Sam doing the same thing Vidlac, Vidlac. I could see Vidlac doing some of the same things that McDowell does. Maybe not to the point where he's going out and running, 18 times a game. But, some of the schemes that they run, I think that he could run those. And it's just perplexing that they don't do that.
Yeah, the other part that's just it's lacking is college football in its essence now in 2023 is all about making kids make mistakes. I mean, it really is what it's about. It's about getting guys in space and making this guy make a mistake, miss a tackle here, blow a coverage there.
Right.
And like if you watch what the Cats do, I think there's this huge misperception because the Cats certainly grind people down. They grind them into dust.
Yeah.
But they don't do it by just firing off the ball and blowing you off the ball. They beat you to the spot and then let their guys run to space. They use their athleticism so well. Like every once in a while, they'll put their hands in the dirt and really just fire off and run an inside zone play and get some yards, whatever. But mostly, they're just beating you to a spot. They're shielding you, and then boom, their running backs are so fast they can just get to space. That's where I wonder if the Grizz stuff is just too archaic. I mean, what they're running, you're an old offensive lineman, Luke. Like what I watch is they're running true like 1998 Mike Shanahan Denver Broncos zone blocking, right? Yeah. This pair here and this threesome here. We're moving it this way or this way. And I really think that it's all predicated on physicality. Who's going to get off the ball? Who's going to, be tougher? You don't necessarily have to do that in college football anymore. Mm-hmm. You just have to beat people to a spot and let your running backs run in space. That's one thing they've done so well, though. They've widened the splits now, and they're letting these guys get out a little bit. They're running these screen plays. And I also think that the offensive line was having a really hard time with the two quarterback thing because you don't know if you're trying to block for a guy who's running around all crazy back there, if you're blocking for a guy that's just holding the ball and standing in the pocket. I think just making the decision to go with McDowell has really helped them.
I think that's really helped him a lot. And I was saying this during the Idaho State game at the very end when he had his helmet got knocked off and McDowell pops up and he's all fired up. I was like, okay, finally we've got a guy that's wanting to lead this team, kind of like when Snead took over. And so I think that's a big part of it too. I feel the leadership out of McDowell when he's out there for the offense. And so I feel like he's just taken over because of that.
Muted myself on accident. No, I totally agree with you. And the other thing that's so interesting, and I've thought about this with Grizz basketball so much, Travis DeCuire is a hard ass coach, right? Yeah. And he's gonna, if he wants to challenge you as one of his players, takes you out of the game, gets in your face, just rips you to shreds, and then wants to like re-release you out there with some energy. Well, when he had guys like Ahmad Rory and Saeed Pridgett, he used to get into it with Saeed Pridgett so bad, they would just be screaming at each other. And then he'd go let Saeed Pridgett back in the game, and Saeed Pridgett go score 4 straight buckets. Yeah. They responded so well to it. That's where, Coach Houck, when he had Dalton Snead, Snead's that type of guy. You go back and forth, you're screaming at each other, it's all good. You let him back out there. Well, then, Cam Humphrey's the nicest guy in the world. He's like, could have been the student body president or whatever, but like he's not a fiery guy. He's just chilling all the time, right? Lucas Johnson, just cool as a cucumber, California cool. Chris Brown, he has a hard time with all that too. You can tell so much that McDowell, it's so clear, like he grew up in the high school football systems where he was used to that. And like when you watch him on the sidelines, Coach Houck will be grabbing him by the face mask and he's just, yep, not flustered at all. And then he goes back out there and he's ready to roll. And I really think that too, just, like I always say on my radio show, the talent of your quarterback, his ability to execute, that's important.
Yeah.
The confidence he engenders your team with is more important.
Yep, I agree.
If you're going to be a defensive-minded team, that's what these guys want. Like, I think that's what was happening at NAU. I think the defense was just like, man, we can't make any more plays. Like, what? Why, and this guy can't get rid of the ball. He's getting sacked every other play, and then he's throwing picks when he's actually getting the ball off. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Now they got McDowell who can get them fired up. He can hit the big shot when they need it. I just think it's been a wholesale benefit for the team.
Oh, yeah. Like the last game when he stiff-armed that guy, you can see the whole team just going nuts for it. He gets them all fired up. So I agree with what you're saying there, Colter. Like if you're out there and he plays like that defensive mentality that they have on the defense too, it gets the whole team fired up. And that's what they needed. And it's working right now.
I mean, it works in college football so much. I think a lot of times our brains get skewed when we try to analyze between college and the NFL.
Yeah.
They're just two such different sports. I mean, Tim Tebow couldn't throw the ball to save his life. He won 2 national championships and won the Heisman because his team wanted to play for him, right?
Yep,
like that's what it takes sometimes. And I think that's why McDowell, I don't know if they're going to regret not going with him earlier because, I mean, truly, they only lost 1 game.
Yeah.
And they were experimenting with all this different stuff. But, I mean, now – the proof's in the pudding. It doesn't matter how many yards he's thrown for or anything like that. I mean, he's 4-0 as a starter, and everybody has a lot of confidence in him.
Yep, exactly.
So we got the Idaho game. You were at Idaho for that game, right?
I was, yeah. I was on the sideline, which was cool. It was fascinating to be down there.
That's awesome. It's like one of their first sellouts in like 30 years or something like that. That's crazy atmosphere for the student section and also for Montana. Have you ever heard of a home team switching where they have their sections to kind of throw off the other opponent?
I mean, what a grave error on Idaho's part.
Yeah, big time.
I mean, they thought it was going to get into Montana's head, and it did not at all.
Anything against them. Yeah.
Oh, it definitely did. I mean, I thought it was hilarious too because, this day and age, I sometimes get so frustrated because I think that we have a hard time letting adolescents be adolescents.
Yeah.
You don't let kids freak out at games anymore, and you don't want them swearing or drinking or whatever. And it's like sometimes that's just you got to do it to just get it out of your system or whatever. That's what was one part that was so fascinating about this. First of all, they sell beer in the stadium at the Kibbe Dome.
Yep.
And they let you bring it straight down to your seat. So the whole student section, everybody's got 2 tall boys and they're drinking and nobody cares, right? And Idaho, their student section is just going crazy. F the Grizz, F the Grizz.
Oh, yeah.
And the Grizz are chanting back at them. And I also thought it was awesome that Coach Houck did not try to regulate it at all. He was not like, don't pay attention to that, nothing. He just let them go. Just said, if you want. So there was a whole dialogue going on. People are talking back and forth. And every time the Grizz would make a play, they'd come off the field and talk smack. It was like such old school. It was like being in 1995 or something like that. It was awesome. It was awesome to watch. But I think it was a grave error on Idaho's part because it did not deter Montana whatsoever. In fact, I think it was a huge advantage for the Grizz.
Yeah, I know. When who was it? Was it Kyle that posted that video, or was it? I can't remember which one posted it. Maybe it was Sean, of them chanting the F the Grizz and stuff. And you could see the players, they were already going yeah, come on, keep bringing it to us. And I was like, oh boy, it's just fueling those guys. And if I was on that side, I'd do the same thing. It's just all right, we're going to shut you guys up right now and fuel them.
Well, one of the hardest parts Montana's had with this new age player, sometimes they have a really hard time translating the energy when they go on the road.
Right.
They're always up for home games, but then they have a hard time when they go on the road. Well, this time it wasn't hard for them on the road at all because it was a sellout. It was just like playing a Washington Grizz, and in fact, it was probably motivating to have everybody cheering against you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Luke, you have any other questions before we go into the UNC preview? Or
I guess I have one.
Yeah.
I've always just wanted to ask you this, Colter, because I've had the opportunity of hanging out with Marty one time at Paradise Falls last year for a little bit. And I absolutely love Marty on the call and just love him on your show and stuff. And so just wanted to hear your thoughts on Marty and how great a football mind he is.
Well, first of all, he's just such a wonderful guy. I mean, I always tease him. I lost my dad 10 years ago, and I always tell Coach Marty, you're my replacement dad, man. You can be my dad anytime. He's such a good dude, and he's such a great family man. I mean, talk about it inspiring, to work a life in football and still have such a close bond with your wife and your 4 kids. And, they all spend so much time together still. And it's so hard to do when you're working this industry. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're a coach or a player or you're in the media, whatever. It's just long hours. Your weekends are eaten up all the time. So it's just really hard. And so that part is just, I just love about him. But also it's just, like today, we were breaking down all the motions that the Miami Dolphins run in their offense. And, we're talking about the brotherly shove, and he's breaking that whole thing down. And, and then he's dropping how he talked to Lamar Jackson after they lost to Pittsburgh. And this is crazy. I'm from Missoula, Montana. Here I got this guy that coached Brett Favre and Steve Young and Lamar Jackson on my radio show every week. It's just incredible. Nice. And I think it's so awesome that he loves to do it just for the people of Montana. So, yeah, no, it's the the best part about Marty is he's like that all the time. He's just so entertaining. Like he'll give you the tour of his house and it's entertaining. Same way. He's still just talking just like that. And
he's so awesome. I think he's a national treasure. I'm just like, the fact that he's like comes on your show and does all that stuff. And like, you're absolutely right. When I ran into P Falls last year, I was just like, "Hey coach." And he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" We just shot the shit for a little bit and it was awesome. So just a great.
He's like the Dick Vitale of the gridiron. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love it. He makes time for everybody too, right? Like I got 3 young guys that all work for me that are like producing my show and stuff, and they call various other sports and stuff. And he always makes sure to go in there and tell them a story, just so they feel special. Awesome. He's the man, dude. Marty's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, Colter, you got Northern Colorado this week. 0-7 or 0-4 in the conference. They haven't played terribly bad. If you look at their schedule, the first 3 games, Abilene Christian 11-31, Incarnate Word 7-42, and then Washington State, they got blown out by 43 some points. But you look at their Big Sky Conference, they lost 14 points to Idaho State, which doesn't look like too bad of a loss now, because Idaho State's 3-1, and Weber State, they had that game until the last 4 minutes, and they lost on an interception ran back. Sac State, they lost by 8 there, and Cal Poly, that's probably the only bad loss because I think Cal Poly is probably one of the worst teams in the Big Sky. Yeah. But where do we put UNC? Should we be worried? They're coming into Washington Grizz. Are we going to be looking at Sac State the next week? Is there something in this UNC team that we should be worried about?
Well, they're certainly going to be well coached. I mean, Ed Lamb is a guy that's had a lot of success in the Big Sky Conference. I got to know Coach Lamb really well when he was at Southern Utah. And when we first launched Skyline Sports, that was sort of 2014, 2015 was such a weird time in the Big Sky because the Grizz were in this state of flux. Mick Delaney was about to be on the way out. The Cats were a total mess. Rob Ash was on the hot seat and then unceremoniously fired. And so there was like this vacuum of this opportunity for other teams to rise. And so like that first year of Skyline in 2015, Portland State and Southern Utah were the two best teams in the league. And just lucky enough for us, nobody else covers them either. So it was like worth our time and resources to cover them quite a bit. And, Eastern Washington was, of course, rolling right then and there too with Cooper Kupp and Kendrick Bourne and all those guys. But Coach Lamb, I'm so interested to see. He did as good a job. I always think this in the Big Sky, you have to do two. You have to identify and accentuate the strengths and advantages that your university and your program just intrinsically has, and you got to mitigate the disadvantages of those things, right? Southern Utah, their disadvantages are they're in a 15,000 person town. It's a dry county, so like there's not any college lifestyle there. Right. They were a former D2 school. I think a lot of people in Utah still think of them like that.
Yeah,
and they don't pay their coaches anything, right? Well, but the advantages are you're in Utah where there's great prep football. You got this whole LDS missionary thing that you could take advantage of. So that's what Lamb did. He said, okay, because he's got BYU ties, and that's where he was at most recently before he came back to Northern Colorado. And he said, hey, so a lot of people don't know this. At BYU, a lot of times they sign a whole class of guys, and then they encourage and they really want you to go on your mission right away. You redshirt a year, and then you go on your mission when you're 19. Then they have an ability to sort of evaluate you and then make a plan for later on. And some guys they invite back, some guys they don't invite back because they got a chance to see them for a year. Well, all the guys that they didn't invite back, Ed Lamb went out and got all those guys. And so like that 2015 Southern Utah team, I think they had something like 13 guys that were from the class of 2009. So they had all these guys that had graduated high school 6, 7, 8 years earlier, and they rolled and they won the Big Sky Conference championship. So he knows how to do that. He knows how to identify advantages and disadvantages. The problem with them,
they did that.
Yeah, I mean, crazy. The problem though at Northern Colorado is, at least to this point, no one has really been able to find what the advantages are.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody in the league has tasted some semblance of success since Northern Colorado joined the league in 2006, except Northern Colorado. Like they had, I guess, 2 winning seasons under Ernest Collins when they were like 6-5 both years, but they have come nowhere close to making the playoffs, nowhere close to winning the league championship. And like the reasons for that have always been perplexing to me. First of all, I don't know why this is, but like high school football in Colorado is just not that good. It's so weird. Right. And the prospects that are coming out of there that are really good, they go to like these feeder academies. They go to the Valor Christians of the world, or the Highland Ranches, the Cherry Creeks, these big schools, and they're all going to the SEC or the Pac-12. There's no one like falling through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
So that part's always been weird. I think that's why you've seen, especially over the last 20 years, Colorado State struggle as well. Some of the best guys in state are leaving.
Right.
But to answer your question, I mean, Northern Colorado is going to be well coached, because it's not just Coach Lamb there. I mean, Justin Walterscheid, who's their special teams coordinator, he's a guy that has deep Big Sky Conference ties. He was at Southern Utah, both under Coach Lamb and under DeMario Warren. Aaron Fernandez, their defensive line coach, has been with Coach Lamb for a really long time. And they got some other guys on the staff that have played in the Big Sky. So, I mean, that's one wholesale change for Northern Colorado. I mean, they were the worst run program in the league the last couple of years because Ed McCaffrey just didn't even care. I mean, the stories out of there were outrageous. Like when I heard at the Big Sky kickoff, half their coaching staff didn't even live in Greeley because these guys had like day jobs in Denver, and they were just coming to practice like at 3:30 in the afternoon, like it's high school football or something. It's like, what? It's actually amazing that they won I think they won 3 games last year. It's like amazing that they won any games by doing that. Like when you're going against other D1 schools where everybody's doing it full time. So that just the dedication of the coaching staff is going to be a huge jump for Northern Colorado. Their biggest problem, I mean, they've been actually playing pretty good defense so far, especially, in Big Sky Conference play. They've been holding teams relatively, in check. I mean, you talk about holding Sac State to 21, holding Weber. I mean, I guess 2 of those Weber scores were defensive touchdowns.
Yep.
So you've been decent defensively. They just haven't been able to figure out a way to score any points, and they haven't been able to figure out a way to take care of the ball either. So I don't know. I mean, I guess like the pessimist in you could say, well, a 0-win team, is this the time where they come? This is their Super Bowl. They knock off Montana. I mean, if Montana takes care of the football and they don't turn the ball over, I can't imagine there's going to be any realm of possibility where they're going to come into Missoula and get a win.
Yeah. Well, then their ranks for Big Sky Conference, they're last in scoring offense, number 10 in the rushing, and 8 in passing. So a lot of that offense is the middle of the pack or the bottom of the pack. And from when I was doing this, looking up some of the research, they were second most in interceptions, which they were just behind us. And that was before the Montana State game finished up. But that's interesting to see their defense taking away the ball, but they haven't really been doing that either on the offensive side. They've been giving the way of the ball as well, with Jacob Sermon just throwing the ball 7 interceptions this year and 8 touchdowns.
Yeah. You don't like getting hit too often.
No.
Like he's always sliding down. I mean, I just watched the Weber game, but he looks at his first read and that's about it. And then he didn't like getting hit. So if we can get pressure on him, I really think we can make it a long day for him.
Yeah. It's fascinating too. I don't know how many of your listeners know this whole deal, but Jacob Sermon is the son of David Sermon, who played at Montana. He was a linebacker on the 95 national championship team. Another Sermon brother also played at Montana. There's Sermons all over the place in college football. The Sermons that played at Montana recently, Cy Sermon and those guys, they're his cousins, Jacob Sermon's cousins.
Right.
But I know that when Jacob Sermon was first leaving Washington, he was very interested in coming to Montana. They didn't have a spot for him, and so he ends up at Central Michigan with Jim McElwain. That doesn't work out, so then he matriculates his way to Greeley. But make no mistake, he's a familiar guy to the coaching staff, and because they didn't take him, I know they're going to want to not let him beat them, and I know they're going to want. I know they're going to really want to bring it. And that's the thing. The Grizz pass rush is it's the whole key to everything, because if you run this scheme, you got to get heat on the quarterback. When you don't, the scheme is totally vulnerable to getting picked apart. When you do, then I mean, like Coach Alk says, some of the yardage stuff or whatever is just empty calories.
Right.
You got to get heat on the quarterback. You got to hit him. If you can get heat on Giovanni McCoy, who runs around crazy, you're definitely going to be able to get heat on Jacob Sermon.
Yeah, I would sure hope so. After we did in Idaho. So,
well, and it was crazy too because we hadn't had any pressure on anybody for a while, and then all of a sudden the Idaho game 6 sacks. What do you kind of relate that to, Colter? Is that just scheme? Is that effort? Is that what we were kind of trying to show and not show too much, or what was that?
Well, I think there's several factors in there. I mean, I think one, the injuries up front have been well chronicled, but I some of them I don't think people really know about. I mean, first of all, they had no D tackles besides Alex Gubner. I mean, they're playing their backup tight end for Christ's sake as the backup defensive tackle. Like that's how thin they were up there. So getting Noah Cashmitter back just so he can get in the fold a little bit, getting Kellen Dietrich back. Those guys are still on their way up to becoming true impact players, but even just being able to play 10, 12 snaps each lets it so the big man, Gubner, can get a little more gas in the tank. That helps for sure. But Cale Edwards, he's been playing on a bum ankle, and he's tough as nails, so he didn't want anybody to know that, but he's definitely been getting tons of rehab, and I think he's back to full strength, so I think that helps as well. I also think, though, they were doing some stuff schematically. Like UC Davis, Coach Houck bit my head off at the press conference after UC Davis, but I know I was right. Like, I asked him about bringing less pressure with their inside guys. He's like, I would say that's incorrect. And I'm like, well, I know it's not, but I know what you're doing because you don't want people to know that that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
But then they went back to full on bringing pressure with their inside guys. And I think that those guys are figuring it out a little bit as well. I mean, I think
we agree with you, Colter. We said that on our podcast too. We're like, we agree with you.
The Davis game, they were letting their guys roam around and make tackles in space, and that's what you should do against that offense, right? You should let your guys run around and make tackles in space. So it's good coaching for sure. The other part, though, is like I still think that their number one personnel deficiency is like everybody talks about all the pressure that they bring. Even though they only run a 3-man front, it's a 4-man front with that outside edge guy that they run. Janicaro is a great linebacker. He can hand fight, and he's so good at getting off blocks and making tackles in the box. But he doesn't really have like that bend that you need as an outside
you need
guy.
As defensive end kind of outside linebacker, yeah.
Right, and that's where O'Connell was so versatile because O'Connell can play that spot. He can bump out and cover the receiver, but he can also come off the edge. He's the best pass rusher they've had in the last 5 years. So I just think that that's still a spot that they're still kind of lacking just in terms of personnel. I always thought they should just bump Cale Edwards out to that spot and bring another bigger body in there at the DN spot. I just think that I've said this on my radio show several times. I think Edwards is one of the best NFL prospects on the team. I don't think he has the mass yet, but I mean, he runs better than anybody on their defense, period. I think fans would be surprised. He's like the single fastest guy on their defense. Jeez. Like he's as fast as the corners, and he's faster than everybody else. He runs really, really, really well. And I just think, and he's tough, but I just think having him crash in and stunt and do all this stuff where he's just eating up blocks, I just think it's wasting his talent off the edge. Right. I just wish they would put him in a better spot to wreak havoc there. But either way, I think that the pass rushes come from regaining some bodies, regaining some depth. And I also think they were hiding a lot of stuff to then unleash it on Idaho, and I think they did a good job to get to that point.
Yeah, I'd love to see Cale out there in that Pat O'Connell position. I think that would be – I never thought about that, but, man, I didn't know his speed. But you say that, and I'm like, man, that would be awesome to see him out there.
He's 6'5". He's got long levers. Like, he's got the – I think he's a poor man's Daniel Hardy. Mm-hmm. Daniel Hardy played DN for the Cats. Yeah. Hardy was this tweener. He was kind of floating around, and then Vegan got there, and they're like, we're running a 4-man front. We're putting you at DN. He has 17.5 sacks. Now he's playing the NFL. Right. I just think that Edwards is in that same vein.
Yeah.
What do you think of like Riley Wilson playing that spot? Because, I think he's kind of learning the system a little bit, and then he got hurt, so that kind of slowed his process up as well. I think he has so much talent too that it just to kind of unleash that would be something that we could do as well in that spot too.
But I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because that's another reason, getting him back. I mean, he is the guy that has the juice off the edge that you need. I mean, he's the guy that's got that motor. He's fast. He's not as big as O'Connell, but he runs really well. Yeah, I mean, he's just had a hell of a time staying healthy throughout his career. Yeah. I mean, he was hurt up. He had a head injury and an ankle injury at the same time. So, I mean, he was just kind of swimming and he hadn't got the reps in, but I do think having him back helps a lot too.
Well, I don't think we've even come close to seeing his best game yet.
No, he's only a sophomore too. I think people forget that. They've been bringing most of their transfers they bring in are older guys. He has several years left, so I think he has a lot of upside.
Yeah.
So, looking at Northern Colorado, what would your keys of the game be? And then also Colter, what would you say those keys of the game? I know probably not turning the ball over and giving them extra possessions where that could hurt us. But what else would you think is the keys of the game?
Well, I know, I'm watching them. I mainly just watched the Weber film, but they really like that quick play offense, which we've struggled with a little bit at times. So we're going to make sure we get lined up quick on defense. I also noticed they like to go spread them out 5 wide, or they'll go max protection, bring everybody in the box, and then try to make us man up on their wide receivers. So I really think if we get pressure though on their offense and get pressure on the quarterback and just hit them a bunch, it's going to be a long day, and they're going to have a hard time putting points up against us.
Yeah, but I just think you got to just believe in all the momentum you built and just carry that. I mean, Montana's going to be better across the board. North Colorado's struggling. They have there's several problems you could have as a program. They have all of them. I mean, they're in the rebuilding phase. Right. They have a talent deficiency. They don't have a coaching deficiency anymore, so that's a good thing.
Oh, Lamb's good, yeah.
And I think I don't think they have an effort problem anymore because that comes from coaching. But I mean, they have so many disadvantages. It's going to be tough to build it there because I don't know. I could go on a rant about this. They just should be Division II. They are a Division II football program.
When Glenn was there, that's when they were so good. Back when Joe was there before he came here, and they won championships and stuff. They were this great Division II school, and it's got to be hard down there in stinky Greeley.
For sure.
When you're trying to out recruit your Colorado States, or
well, and that's just going to get even harder with Prime there too.
I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, it's just you got all that, and it's got to be hard for them. So, and then this year, I think about it too. We talked about coming to Washington Grizzly. How our team got up last week going against Idaho. How will they react coming to Washington Grizzly when everybody's gonna be nuts and excited for the Grizz to be back, and especially after the big Idaho win? So we'll see what that does to that team too.
I mean, I don't think Northern Colorado will be able to block Montana. So you just got to keep the pass rush rolling. Mm-hmm. I don't think they'll be able to match up with them on the perimeter when Montana has the ball. So you just got to keep giving your playmaker. I mean, that was what was so frustrating about the Grizz for most of last year and the whole first month of this year was Junior Bergen, Aaron Fonts, Eli Gilman, and Keelan White are just better than every guy they're going to go against. They're just better. Yep. I mean, Idaho has a great corner, and when they play the Cats, they have some guys that can match up. But in the Big Sky, by and large, the guys that are guarding those guys can't guard them. They can't guard them. Yeah. So just get on the ball. That's it. And they finally figured that out. Against Idaho, they weren't running much of nothing. They were just snapping Clifton the ball, and you run around a little bit. Okay, there's Keelan White. Boom, hit him. Yeah. And it's going to be the same thing with Northern Colorado. Just don't make it too complicated. Just get your guys the ball in space and just let it rip.
Yeah, I agree.
Colter, I have a question for you because, I feel like the last couple of years when the Grizz have played down to opponents, do you think we played I feel like going to California, we always would play down in a certain way, maybe to Cal Poly in earlier ages, but just those games where we play down to those opponents. Do you feel like we still do that? Is that something that you see happening more often than not, or is that something I'm just reading into?
That's so interesting too, because these last 2 games, those have been the first 2 games of Bobby Hauck's whole career. Yeah, where his team is the underdog by the point spread and the national narrative and the rankings. The Grizz are never dogs. That's not a thing under Coach Hauck, and they have been. And I think that he was he used that as full motivation. Hey, guys, we're going to go play the number 3 team in the country. Let's go prove that they're not the number 3 team in the country. Let's go. I mean, he said all week last week, the only reason people thought Idaho was good because they beat Montana. He's so funny when he starts talking smack like that. But anyways, I do think sometimes they have an issue with that, but I think it's very rare that it happens at home.
Right.
So I don't know. That's the other part is that you talk about Montana almost always has an advantage in the kick game. They're going to have such a profound advantage in the kick game on Saturday. So that's another place I think they can really dominate.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that, I mean, the end of the season, we finished out with 3 home games. I mean, I can't really imagine that happen. And it's against, your Sac States, the Cats in Northern Colorado. But, I mean, that's huge for us compared to some of these other schedules. Like, I think about the Cats right now. They just went on the road at Sac. Now they're going on the road to Idaho. I'm glad we just won 2 road games, but it's much more better schedule for us right now going forward, I think.
Oh, the Cats have a horrible schedule down the stretch. Like, they have some really tough games.
Yeah,
they haven't played anybody up to this point except for Sac State, but they're going to actually have to play some people now. And South Dakota State, yes, that was a huge win or huge loss. Sorry, a huge loss, but I don't think that they played up to the potential of other teams in the Big Sky.
Yeah, it's interesting how the way the schedules have worked out. I mean, October has been the month of doom for Montana for a long time. That's when it all unraveled in 2018. It's when it all unraveled last year.
Yep.
I mean, I bet you that they've been below 500 in the month of October since how it came back, and they were always bad in October with Stitt too.
Mm-hmm.
So weird. But now look at them now. If they win on Saturday, they have an undefeated October, and they're going to go. I mean, how crazy is it going to be when this team wins more games than last year's team?
Right. When we had,
they're gonna
win
8. They're gonna win 8 games for sure during the regular season, and they might win 9 or 10.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Especially after last year, and the expectations were, like you said at the beginning, so high. I thought that too, and it was just so it felt like such a letdown. But
such a letdown.
It's like, man, I mean, sky's the limit right now.
Colter, assuming that we win, right? Assuming that we win this game and we make it to the playoffs. How far do you see this team going? How far? Could we get a seed?
It's such a fascinating question because so much of all of this that we've talked about, and so much of the freak out after the NAU game and all of that, it's all colored by one thing. That the Cats are the best or second best team in the country, and that they have their best roster. I don't know. I've covered the Cats for 13 years now. It's the best team I've ever covered that they've had for sure. And they don't have the top end talent like the Troy Andersons and Daniel Hardys of the world, but I mean, they just have such an absurd amount of depth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're rolling right now without their 2 starting guards, their starting running back, their second string running back. All their best receivers have been out at some point this year. They didn't have their best tight end on Saturday. They didn't have their best linebacker. He dislocated his elbow 3 plays into the game. I mean, it doesn't matter. The next guy up there just rolled. They're so deep.
Yeah.
That's colored this whole thing. That's going to be the other part about this, right? Because if I was a betting man, I think Montana's going to roll Northern Colorado. Then I think they'll beat Sac State under the lights at home because I think the crowd will just be so crazy.
Yeah.
Portland State's actually be tougher than people think, but they laid a complete egg on Saturday because I think Barney was already looking down the road to the Montana game and saying, hey, we can get to 5-1 in league. We could play Montana for something. And then they go, they just go blow it against Idaho State, who, by the way, is better. But regardless, I think the Grizz have a real shot of being 9-1 going in the rivalry game.
Yeah.
And then they think they have a real shot of getting their asses kicked at home in the rivalry game. How do you respond to that? Also, though, if they are 9-1 and the Cats are 9-1 and go in the rivalry game, then throw it all out the window. Because Bobby Houck will throw the absolute kitchen sink at the Cats. They will do whatever they can.
Right.
I think the biggest nightmare for the Cats is if South Dakota State loses and they get number 1 in the country the week or 2 weeks before they come to Washington Grizzly Stadium. Because then it's going to be it's going to be an insane asylum at Washington Grizzly Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Like the last time they were number 1 in the country and we went in there. It was in Bozeman.
Smoked them.
Yeah, smoked them. Yeah.
Smoked them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, 36-10. I'll never forget it. Yeah, I don't know. So that's the whole thing is like, how deep can this team go? If they play their cards right, though, and they get the right – here's what I actually think. I think that the FCS isn't very good anymore. No. I think that it's the Big Sky and the Missouri Valley, and that's it.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you get the right draw, I think Montana's playing tougher teams right now than they would have to play in the playoffs, right? Yeah. I think Idaho and Sac State, Montana State are better than anybody that they would draw in the second round or the quarters. So then it's just all about how do you get the right seeding. If the Grizz can get to 9-1 before the Cat Grizz game, then I think they're inside track, if not certainly going to get a seed no matter what happens with the Cats.
Yeah.
And if you get a seed, you get a first-round bye, and you get at least one home game, boom, you're into the quarterfinals, and then you just got to go win one time, and then you're in the Final Four, and now all of a sudden your season is exactly what the standard at Montana is, and it's a success.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's so weird just because, you've got the two teams that are legitimately title contenders in South Dakota State and Montana State. And then, you see North Dakota State get beat by 20-some points, and the team that beats them goes and lays an egg and loses by 27 to, Northern Iowa.
Yeah.
And so you just don't know what's going to happen in these leagues with the Missouri Valley and also the Big Sky.
This week it'll be interesting because you got USD and South Dakota State playing. So,
yeah,
I still think South Dakota State is gonna beat the Yotes, but you never know. You never know what could happen with that game. So,
yeah, definitely. So, we have a couple questions on fan questions on eGriz and stuff. One of them you mentioned, Colter. Michael Kemper says he wants to know how awkward it can get in a press room when Bobby goes off. And I think he was referring to when he went off on you, even though you were right. How awkward is it? Is it awkward? Do other people kind of like look at you like, oh, man, stay strong? Or
this is actually so funny because now it's to the point where it's like it's not really awkward, just because so often in the Montana media, the print guys are around for a long time, but the TV guys are like every 2 years and they just leave.
Right.
Well, right now in Missoula, there's several TV guys that are like veterans. I mean, Sean and Kyle are two of my good buddies, because they've been around forever. We've been doing this together for a long time. I think Kyle's on year 5 in TV and year 8 covering the Grizz, and Sean's, he's only a couple years younger than me. I think he's in year 11 or whatever. Right. I've covered Coach Houck every season of his career. My first season ever covering the Big Sky for the Montana Kaiman was my junior year at Montana, and Coach Houck, that was 2006. When Coach Houck was the coach. So I've covered every one of his seasons. So now I think we just kind of know. We just kind of expect it, And that's the thing is, like, before the presser starts and after it ends, he's just like charming Bobby Houck. How's it going? What'd you guys do this weekend? What's going on, And like whenever he rips my head off, then afterwards he'll come up and be like, I had to give you hell, Like it's just a thing. It's a persona. I truly don't know if I think he thinks that the Monday pressers are the only thing that the other team can watch.
Right.
And then he thinks that like the coach's show with Riley is like
no one watches.
It's only on the radio in Missoula during that time, so no one can find it. Like he doesn't know it's podcasted and like everybody can listen to it.
Yeah.
Because I haven't had as much time this year, but I used to go get him before practice on Wednesdays.
I remember
and he'd be great. He told me, hey, you come prepared. If you have 5 questions, I'll give you 6 minutes and we can get it done. And so I'd go, and we did, 5 questions with Coach Houck every Wednesday, and he would always be just fine. And it's just so funny. He like thinks he has to flex on everybody at these Monday pressers. It's just classic.
Well,
it is very classic.
I'm in the QB club, and not the same person at all.
Exactly.
It's like, who's this guy?
Totally.
So, the other one that I think we kind of covered on here as well, the Proud Grizz Man on eGrizz says, thank you for doing these interviews. Colter, thank you for what you do for Grizz Nation and all the coverage that you do. I'm curious if Colter will go into this again and maybe a little deeper. The changes and the adjustments we've went over, the offensive line we've gone over. Just reading through here. He wants to know if the changes in the coaching staff of the offensive line, if that has paid dividends or if it hasn't really made any momentum into the right direction. With
interesting,
having those 2 coaches there.
Yeah, interesting question. If people want to know what I'm looking at over here, I got the Vikings 49ers game on.
Oh, sure.
I was the the only thing I have fandom left in the whole world, because I've always prided myself on being this objective journalist, and people always ask me, who are you rooting for? And I always say I'm only rooting for the good stories. Like, it doesn't matter to me who wins or loses. I just like the stories. I mean, if it's up to me, I want all the kids to do good, right? I said that after the Idaho-Montana game. I said it's a shame somebody has to lose that game, because that game was an awesome game where everybody laid it all out there. They put their heart on their sleeves. So I'm always just rooting for the good stories. The one piece of fandom I got left is for the stupid Minnesota Vikings. And it's just like, I've been trying to get divorced for like 5 years, and I just can't. And several of my best friends are Niners fans. And so I watch the Niners all the time, because that's who the guys, the two guys I watch football with the most. They're huge Niners fans. So I'm always watching the Niners. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be the night. I'm gonna be officially become a Niners fan when the Niners go into Minnesota and just rip the Vikings to shreds.
Right.
And then, of course, because I'm a complete degenerate loser, instead I went to the betting machine right before this game and bet the Vikings plus 6.5 and bet the Vikings to win plus the under. And now here I am, and I'm only 6 minutes away from winning both my bets, and I can't get divorced. I'm still going to be a Vikings fan. So pathetic.
I hadn't checked the score. I'm like, oh, boy.
God,
Yeah.
I know.
I was like, oh, geez.
This is Coach Marty's fault, because during our segment today, we asked him about the deal, and he was like, hey, I think the Niners are one of the best teams in the NFL, but he's like, Minnesota is going to be playing out of their minds at home Monday Night Football. He's like, I think the Vikings are going to cover. So, of course, I went to the machine and bet $20 on the Vikings to cover. Anyways, I digress. The co-offensive line stuff. This is a really hard question for me to analyze, because this time of year, my Nuanez Now show is on from 4 to 6.
Yeah.
So they're practicing
Right.
when I'm on the air, so I can't ever go watch them practice. As a former offensive lineman, I thought the fact that they were going to have co-offensive line coaches was not a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I just think that, like, having the continuity and the brotherhood, and just like Luke knows this, the best offensive lines are the ones that are one unit. It's one unit.
Together. They're just
everything together.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't know if it's paid dividends or not. I will say their offensive line's playing better. Let's go, Vikings pick. They're playing better for sure than they were earlier in the year. I don't know if they're fully living up to their potential or not yet. I think that's all TBD. I don't know. It's a tough one, man, because I just think that goes all the way back to like one of your first questions, Adam, when it comes to like, how do you get into the new age? I just think that, like, and this is nothing against Montana's current coaching staff. They got a lot of guys on there that have a ton of football experience. They're really awesome, whatever. I just think that you could go – I mean, the Cats lose their offensive line coach last offseason, right? Brian Armstrong goes to Fresno State. He's one of the most popular guys in the whole program. He's recruited Montana really well. He's one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. Who are they going to replace him with? Dude from Wisconsin who played in the NFL. Like, you could just get these elite coaches. And Chad Germer, I love Chad Germer. One of my first features I ever wrote on the Grizz football team was about Coach Germer when I was a kid. And, I've covered his kids in high school. And, on a personal level, he's the man. I love hanging out with him and all that sort of stuff. And Rob Fennessy, same thing. I've known Coach Fenn forever. I just think that you can get like these top tier elite young coaches to come here. And so I don't know. I don't know. I guess the answer to that question is TBD.
Yeah. And it's interesting because not a lot of teams do that, right? There's only a handful that kind of have that that dual coach, and just that communication as well is just kind of odd too. So we'll see going down the line of what happens with that. But Luke, you have any other questions? That's the only fan questions I had. Do you have any other questions?
I was just going to say whatever they're doing right now is working, because they got fire into that offensive line in there. I don't know if it's – I mean, I know Chad can get after your ass because I've seen it. But I don't know if it's the both of them together or what, but they've got those guys playing the right way, and they're doing a little DOLA stuff now. So, yeah, I didn't have any other questions or anything on my end. So,
okay,
that's one interesting observation I'd give you is that the playing with your hair on fire, the lighting a fire under their asses, all that stuff. I think that's how so many of us like grew up playing football, and like the ethos that we believe to be true. Usually when I'm at games, I'm up in the press box. My photographers are on the sidelines. But both Idaho and Sac State have really small press boxes, so they only had
they
one. They only had one seat for us for Skyline. So I let at the Idaho game, I let Andrew Houghton sit up top, and I was down on the sidelines. And then during the Sac State game, I let Tom Stuber sit up top, and I went down on the sidelines. So I got to be on the sidelines for back-to-back games.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what a dichotomy between the Grizz sidelines and the Cat sidelines, and just like the way that they do stuff. Granted, the Grizz game was a little bit different because they're right in front of the student section. So it's, more expletives than you could ever even imagine. And, they're going back and forth. So all that. So that's a little bit of a skewed analysis. But the coaching style and the way they get them fired up and all that, it's so based on, fire and brimstone. We're going to just knock their asses into the dirt and blah, blah, blah. That's great. And I think that's old school. That's how I learned how to play football. That's how my high school coaches were like. So I totally understand that part. The Cats was fascinating. Their offensive line's just sitting around, just jolly as all hell. Like there's no like, oh, we're going to go beat their asses. They're just like, hey, what have you been seeing out there? Oh, you're seeing this? I'm seeing this. All right, cool. We're going to make this adjustment. We're going to do this. It's like very, very, very scientific. Yeah. But they don't ride this roller coaster. It's not like, oh, man, we just got beat there. Man, we got you. You got to get back up and go do it. It's just like, yep, we're good. We're going to go execute again. And it's just amazing the way that the dichotomy. I'm not saying one is right or wrong or whatever. Yeah. It's just fascinating because, like, the Cats, like their offensive linemen, several of those guys are just like these big jolly nerds, right? They're just like these engineering guys, but they just know how to execute so well. And I just think sometimes that can actually, I think sometimes riding the roller coaster emotionally makes you exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes just being steady can get you to places that you couldn't get otherwise. But again, I'm not saying one's better than the other. I just thought it was just striking how different it was.
Yeah, it's interesting. You get to see that difference between the two and see the styles and stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, Colter, we bet on the game, so we won't let you do that because I know that you probably don't want to because of journalistic.
Sure.
But we're all tied up 3-3 because we eliminated the Ferris State game because we were totally wrong.
Yeah.
We were in the 40s, and that game was not in the 48-20 or 48-10. So we threw that one out, and now we're 3-3. So what's your score, Mr. Luke?
All right. So for this game, I've got the Grizz winning 35-13.
35-13. Okay. I have 28-7.
Nice. I like the 7 better. I was the 13. I'm going, I don't know if they'll score that many points against us, but I always think you get some of those weird ass things where it's just a mistake or something. But I did run the so on our show I've got the Versus app, so we always run the computer simulation too to see what they say. And so the Versus app has the Grizz winning 31-6.
Huh. So, interesting.
Yeah.
So Colter, what have you and I haven't asked this, but what is it with the Grizz that we can get either a punter or a kicker, just freshman punters and kickers? The last couple of years, it's been crazy, right? And Glasgow has come out of nowhere, where amazing, right? Where does that come from? Like, where do we find these guys? Like, and I know where we found most of them, and they're here, but where do we find Glasgow? Do you know?
He's a transfer from Kansas, but I think that this is where Bobby Hauck's special teams acumen and reputation precedes him. I mean, Coach Hauck, you can talk about all of his great points as a head coach, all of his flaws, and everything in between. It's undeniable that he is, I think, not only the greatest he's not just the best special teams coach in the conference and the country at this level. I would argue he's the greatest coach of special teams in the history of the Big Sky Conference. I mean, to like put this in comparison, if you were to make a list of the top 15 kick returners and the top 15 punt returners in the history of the league, I'd say at least 10 each are Montana guys that coach out. Yeah. I mean, I said this stat on the radio the other day. The Cats have had, I think, 2 punt returns for touchdowns in the last 10 years.
Oh, geez.
And the Grizz have had at least 2 a year, every single year under Bobby Hauck.
Right.
I mean, besides Dante Pettis, the best kick and punt returner in the history of college football is Rashad Penny. Coach Hauck coached him at San Diego State.
Yeah.
who are the best kick returners in Big Sky history? Tuff Harris and Jefferson Heidelberger and Malik Flowers. Coach out-coached them all. Who are the best punt returners? Tuff Harris, Levander Seegers, Mark Mariani. Mariani's a great kick returner too. You know, I mean, Jerry Louis McGee, all these guys, Coach Houck coached them. Junior Bergen is in that list now. Coach Houck coached them. It's not just a coincidence. I mean, I think that the other stat I had was that Coach Houck has had at least one kick and one punt return touchdowns every single season for 20 years in a row. And that's including at UNLV and at San Diego State. So,
wow.
That itself, plus the way that, you know, I mean, the two leading scorers in the history of the Big Sky Conference, Dan Carpenter and Bernie McKnight. Those were guys that Coach Houck recruited, you know. I mean, one of my roommates in college, Tyson Johnson, he would have been the best punter in Big Sky history if he didn't think he was going to try to play receiver every single spring ball. And he used to always make Coach Houck let him run the 40, and he'd go run 4 or 5 and be like, let me play receiver. And then they'd be like, yeah, you can play receiver. So he wouldn't work out at punter at all during spring. Then you go back out there in the fall, and Coach Houck would be like, yeah, sorry, Tyson, you're the starting punter.
You're the punter.
And he's like, but Coach, I want to catch passes. He's like, nope, you're the punter. Sorry, man. But anyways, I just think that it's a culture, and it's, you know, it's like last year, during fall camp, I asked him, I said, Coach, you lose Kevin Macias, who made, 16, 17 field goals in a row. You lose, I can't remember where we were in that line. I guess you lost Brian Buschini.
Yeah. I was actually at Nebraska this weekend, and I forgot that he was there until they're like from Helena, Montana. And I was like, oh, yeah, Buschini.
Yeah. So, I said, Coach, how are you going to replace these prolific kickers and punters? He said, hey, all your years covered us. We were at a prominent kicker and punter. I said, nope. He said, next question.
I remember that.
So I was like, all right, well, you're right. I mean, they're right. Last year they did have they finally had a flaw in kicker. Nico Ramos was just, average last year.
Right.
But they addressed it, and boom. I mean, Glasgow's lights out, man. I mean, he won him that game at Idaho. That was one of the most underrated parts of that win. He was nails in that game.
Oh, yeah. That ball was just booming off his foot. It was awesome.
I mean, that 49-yarder, I was standing right below. It hit off the top of the wall. And the kid, it smacked the wall. You could hear it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, the announcer was like, yeah, they don't have a net back there. But then after that, they had something back there.
Right. Yeah, there was one side that had a net, one side that didn't. Yeah.
That thing could have gone a long ways. It was crazy. So, Colter, I can't thank you enough for coming on our podcast here, man. It was great to finally meet you, man, and to be able to talk Grizz football with you. I can't thank you enough for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate you guys for having me for sure. And I do this all the time. So if anybody wants to check it out, SkylineSportsMT.com. We got daily podcasts up there. And I also have my daily radio show, Nuanez Now, which Nuanez, you can search it. And we podcast that every day too. So talk tons of Grizz stuff, tons of Big Sky stuff. But thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
no problem. Thanks, Colter.
It's awesome. And no matter where you're at, because like I said, like Adams in Wyoming, I'm over in South Dakota right now. But because of the podcast, I listen to your show every week and get more football and just content. And like I can listen to high school football content, so I get all that still. I mean, it's awesome. And it's so great that now we have that availability to get all that stuff and just that constant contact and stuff, especially if we had to move away from Montana.
So, Exactly. It's on my daily week podcast rituals that I got to listen to Nuanez Now.
One of my favorite parts about this time of year is all the small school, high school football games and the bus trips. How about this one? Baker at Florence.
Oh,
that's 600 miles. These guys are going to have to leave tomorrow to get there by Friday. Crazy.
That is crazy.
And 600 miles on a bus is
on a bus. Yeah.
Is Florence favored in that? They've been just killing it.
Yeah, they're killing it. They're so good, man. It's unbelievable what they got going down there right now. I mean, they must have every guy in the whole school out for football.
I know.
They got like 50 kids out for football. It's a Class B school. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, those guys are killing it down there.
Yeah, Patrick Shane's a great coach.
Yeah, that's I got a friend of mine from high school's kid plays on there. Ari McLaughlin.
Nice.
He does awesome. So little shout out to him.
Sweet. Well, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
all right, thanks, Colter.